This TSN 1040 podcast is powered by Metro Ford. It's hard to beat a Metro Ford deal. In Fort Coquitlam and online at metromotors.com.
Lou Filippo, by the way, was here on show 1. We're at like show 280 or 281.
It's been quite a while.
It has. I remember back in the days when we were debating if young Noah Syndergaard was ever going to turn into somebody. And, well, let's just say he turned into somebody. That was the game that I wanted to watch. Of the games of the week that I saw, Syndergaard against the Blue Jays. You know what I'm going to do is I'm going to buy a Toronto Blue Jays jersey and I'm going to put Syndergaard 34 in the back, which should be, but isn't, because somewhere R.A. Dickey, worst trade in Blue Jays history. I go to McGrave saying it.
It's close.
Come on. You know what? I had a debate on Twitter the other day that I said one of the great, actually, how did I phrase it? The greatest prospect in Blue Jay history prior to Vladimir Guerrero was Vernon Wells. Mm-hmm. And I got lit up like a Christmas tree. And it wasn't even going pitchers. I wasn't talking about, this, that, and the other. And for some reason, over my head was Carlos Delgado.
Yeah, that's the only other guy I could think of, because I remember when the Jays first brought him up, he was still catching, and we'd heard these legendary stories about how far he could hit the ball. And they brought him up and he caught, and then of course they sent him back down and converted him to a first baseman, which was the right move. But we heard about Delgado for a very, very long time before he came up. But Wells, same thing. I mean, Wells, high draft pick, and the 5-tool center fielder.
My one defense in the conversation was that when Delgado came up, it was right when the Blue Jays were hitting their stride en route to 2 World Series. So he kind of eased his way in, despite the fact that he might have been the greatest prospect in Blue Jay history. Whereas Vernon Wells was one of the saviors from the late 90s when everybody was grasping at trying to get back to the glory days. Eventually you had Vernon Wells, you had Sean Green, you had a pretty decent team. But I don't know what it was. I just didn't think of Carlos Delgado in that light. So I guess one of the questions that we'll have today, who is the greatest prospect in Blue Jay history? You can go pitcher. You can talk about Roy Halladay. You can bring up Dave Stieb or Lloyd Moseby if you want to dip your toe into the older waters. Or is it Vladimir Guerrero Jr.? Is he, even though he hasn't even made it to the major leagues, is he the greatest prospect that the Toronto Blue Jays have ever had, going back some 40-odd years, back to 1977?
Do you count as a prospect if you never played in the minors?
A la John Olerud?
You got it. That was pretty impressive when you think about it.
Hold on. That's a good question. Before we get to the statistical assassin, KP Wee, who will break it down, Niall, do we put John Olerud into that conversation?
I think so. He's a prospect. He was too good for the minor leagues, apparently, so why not? I think you have to put him in there.
He was the onus behind that big trade because they needed to find a position for him, so they traded Fred McGriff and Tony Fernandez for Alomar and Joe Carter, which turned out pretty well for the Blue Jays. But that was all based on we need to get a position for John Olerud. And think about that. You've traded away Fred McGriff, who really is, he's got Hall of Fame stats, to give this guy a position before he'd even played. Like, that's pretty impressive.
What do you think, KP?
If we can include pitchers, I'm going to go with Dave Stieb. I mean, the guy was an outfielder converted into a pitcher. And if you look at his stats in the 80s, he was right up there in innings pitched. He just was playing for a team that wasn't ready to contend in the American League East. And you're looking at a time back in those days where you had to win your division in order to qualify for the playoffs. And in those early years in the 80s, he was pitching a lot of the innings. He was, giving quality starts. Just couldn't get those high win totals to qualify for the Cy Young because the team around him wasn't that good at that time.
Yeah, unfortunately, I was around during that time, and I love Dave Stieb as a pitcher. I mean, there's been comparisons of Steve and Morris because they were the dominant pitchers of the 80s. Stieb blows them away except in one category, which is wins. But Stieb was still kind of that quiet guy that came up. He wasn't drafted high. Like you said, he was drafted as an outfielder. Pat Gillick loved to draft athletes. Danny Ainge, for example, and yes, Tom Glavine was drafted. Tom Glavine was drafted as a hockey player as well. But these guys came up with so much hype, and that's what Guerrero is right now. It's kind of like we want him here right now. You didn't hear that clamoring for Dave Stieb, and that was some pretty bad teams. You heard it for Lloyd Moseby because he was a very, very high draft pick, second overall.
See, I'll debate that only based on the fact that pitchers sometimes it takes a little longer to get that rumble. I mean, because again, a couple of strikeout performances, that's fine and dandy, but a guy that can hit a ball 450 feet and it gets out on a vapor trail, that to me is sexy. What screwed Vladimir Guerrero Jr. was what he did in Montreal in the preseason. That home run in the ninth inning that sent everybody in Canada into euphoria is really the last memory that many people have of him in a Blue Jays uniform. Now, if you saw him at spring training, he was in a Blue Jay uniform for about a month and a half. But again, that is the memory. The last time that he was in a Major League Baseball game, he hit a walk-off home run, which only intensifies it. But now, Niall, there are rumors that he's going to go to Buffalo. There's rumors that he's ready to come up. Again, you see Kendrys Morales hitting our weight. Well, actually, he's hitting half of my weight. But I sit around and I say to myself, I've changed. I've 180'd on this because at the beginning of the season, I was like, there's no way you bring him up. You can't bring him up. He's 19 years old. And even though there have been a pocket full of guys that have come up to the major leagues at 19, I don't know if Vladdy mentally is that guy. You've covered the minor leagues for the Toronto Blue Jays for a couple of years. What would I feel like we talk about this every week, but he's hitting 416. 416 at Double-A. What do you do?
I think you do have to send him up to Triple-A. I don't think Double-A right now is a challenge for him. I mean, we've gone past the point now where, it's a small sample size. Let's wait. I mean, again, he's hitting over 400. And I think Triple-A would be a good finishing school for him because he'll face pitchers who have been in the major leagues, even though they may not deserve to be in the major leagues anymore. They still have the, kind of, I guess what's a better word, junk stuff. I guess you'll see more funkier breaking balls, curve balls, that sort of thing. You're not going to see maybe necessarily 100-mile-an-hour fastballs. You'll tend to see those more in Double-A. But yeah, I think it's obviously high time. And you notice that earlier this week, Guerrero kind of trolled everybody, posting a picture on Instagram that he was in was LaGuardia Airport in New York, but that was an earlier picture that was taken. So
as the Blue Jays were getting ready to take on the Mets, which of course is a perfect troll job. KP, we talked about this, you and I, about the fact that aesthetically, Double-A to the majors will raise eyebrows. But Double-A, a little cup of coffee in Triple-A, and then the major leagues, a lot of fans don't want to burn the year. And now we're looking at it from a contractual standpoint and the controllability angle. But the reality is he's got pretty good numbers. But what would you do?
Every week we talk about this, and I kind of think about it a little bit more and kind of debate about this with myself. And I would say again, there's no point in bringing him up to the major leagues this year. Again, where will he play? Unless you move Josh Donaldson either to DH or you actually trade him, there's no spot for Vladimir Guerrero Jr. on this team.
So if they do trade him, not to cut you off, but if they do trade Josh Donaldson, is the very next call to go and get Vladdy from the minors?
If we're talking about controllability, then I would say no, because again, if you're bringing him up, what are you trying to sell tickets? Are you trying to win ball games? What are you trying to do?
All of the above.
Well, I think if you go back to the glory years when 91, 92, 93, yes, they were winning division championships, World Series titles. They were drawing 50,000 plus a game, and they were drawing over 4 million fans per season. But then you go back to when the team started losing, and they brought in Roger Clemens, arguably the best pitcher, the best 2 years in Blue Jays history in terms of pitching. They didn't draw a lot of fans when Clemens was in town, and even though the guy was a big name, a future Hall of Famer at the time, they didn't, sell out the stadium.
I'm going to go along that same line. I don't think bringing him up to sell tickets is of any use. The Toronto fan has proven over time that they're not going to show up for a big name. And Clemens wasn't the only guy. The only pitcher I can remember where they actually had spikes was, of course, Halladay when the team was awful and it was Halladay and nobody else. If they move Donaldson in the same transaction line, should be Vladimir Guerrero Jr. has been called up to because he will have a position. If they are going to let him sit there and play for whether it be 60, 70, 80 games, absolutely. You let him play. Because what else do they have at that position? If he's going to be their future there and that position is open, you put him there. If Donaldson's on the team, you leave him in the farm.
So you're saying Jason Leblevigian won't sell tickets?
No.
I don't know. No, but in all,
Come on, he's a nice guy.
No, but in all honesty, yeah. I mean, the service clock is the big issue with Vladimir Guerrero Jr. Do you want him past a little bit more past his mid-20s? And I think, I don't know, maybe he might be the stopgap.
See,
I don't know.
Here's my problem with that argument is you're either going to pay him at 25 or you're going to pay him at 26, but you're going to pay him. So why wouldn't you get him up here and get him up to major league speed as fast as you can? That to me, I mean, if he ends up being what everybody says he's going to be, which is an iconic player, maybe one of the greatest to ever suit up for the Toronto Blue Jays, hard to say this even in a conversation without laughing based on the fact he's never played a major league game. But if he lives up to the hype, does it really matter if you're paying him at 25 or at 26?
Or do you do what the Tampa Bay Rays did with Evan Longoria? They signed him basically as soon as he got up to the bigs. So I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe they slap down a 10-year deal and see what happens.
Well, no, I just hate that controllability conversation. Because the reality is if you're that good, they'll lock you up.
You don't want to use this as an example, but look at what the Angels did with Mike Trout. If Mike Trout had waited a few more years, he'd be looking at what we're going to discover as Bryce Harper type money. But no, they lock him up after a couple of years, after the third year, where it's pretty obvious this guy's the real deal, to say the least. And you have that opportunity if he comes up and he is that player. You can lock him up when he's 22 until he's 30. And if you're going to lock a player up, 30 is a nice year to have the contract expire.
And finally, to this thought, you also have to remember that the reality is they made Chris Bryant him. He might not come up this year. He might not start the season with the Blue Jays next year. They may try to wait as long as mathematically possible, which to me would be, I don't want to say a disservice to Vladdy, but it might be a disservice to the fans that are the paying people that are clamoring for this guy that's in the minors, that everybody knows can hit the lights out. I think, if you're ready to dissemble the Toronto Blue Jays, which I think they're on the verge of having to do because they're a little long in the tooth.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't you at least get this guy up as kind of the carrot for the fan base?
Yeah, no,
that's me.
And you consider once again the relationship with his dad having played in Canada as well. The Cubs and what they did with Bryant was really kind of interesting, but the Cubs also had other high-profile players on that team already. They'd already started to compile the team that would eventually end the curse. If Vladdy came up to the Blue Jays tomorrow, I would argue that he would be definitely in the top 5 in terms of the most notable players, maybe even the top 3 because of the name.
Marcus Stroman. He's a name that is being bandied about as a guy that might not see next season as a Toronto Blue Jay. Now, those aren't official words coming from anybody that's in the know, but this is what the fan base is starting to bang the drum on. If you had to keep one, I would say it's Aaron Sanchez. I would try to back up the Brinks truck. I would try to lock that guy up as long as I can. I know there's a bit of a love affair with Jay Happ. Far too late as far as, what you can get out of him. But for me, Marcus Stroman, he's the sexy one on social media. He's the sexy one in front of a microphone. But I see him as a piece that you could actually get something of return in. So we'll bandy this about very quickly before we'll take our first break. But Marcus Stroman, if you were buying or selling 200 innings a year, face of your organization in certain facets. But again, this year proving to be human. Buying or selling? Whoever wants to take the floor first on this one.
It depends on what you get for him. He's not so long in the tooth that you want to give up on him. I mean, we just saw with Matt Harvey, who's also 27. But you're starting to wonder now, kind of, with that whole mini tirade after the arbitration thing. And, we don't know the fellow, particularly that well. But you're starting to wonder now if there's distractions, I guess, possibly. Like maybe he is trying too hard. We've talked about him trying to redo his mechanics, which isn't a very bright thing to do when you're, an all-star pitcher. And you really have to start to wonder whether it's all there. And if you can get a good return, absolutely. I mean, he would be the guy I would move if you can get a good return. But you have to accept that it might come back to bite you because he may find it again. But that's something that you have to do if you're a strong front office person.
Yeah, I don't know if you're really going to get anything for him right now, considering he's been on the shelf a couple of times now. He'll be out for a while. I think maybe the best thing for Stroman right now might actually to maybe just go under the radar for a bit. Certainly, he's got quite the presence on social media with his HDMH apparel, height don't measure heart. And, let's face it, he uses that motivation to drive him. I mean, you remember back in 2015 when he had that knee injury, and he came back when he tweeted out the return shall be legendary. It was legendary. He was a big part of that playoff drive, and he really helped the Blue Jays get to the American League Championship Series. I think it's a little too early to think about starting to trade Stroman at this point.
I tend to agree with that one, and I think also we have to kind of think about Sanchez as part of the equation. For Sanchez, didn't do so well tonight, but the last few starts, it looked like he hasn't been throwing a lot of strikes. The last game he won against the Twins, I believe his strike to ball ratio was not very high, like 59%, and that's kind of been a pattern. Now you want to basically, as a pitcher, you want to throw 70% of your pitches as strikes. And so far this season, I think the one concern I would have about Sanchez is that he hasn't been throwing a lot of strikes. So I wouldn't just trade Stroman just for the sake of making a trade, because even with Sanchez, I think there's a bit of a concern in terms of his performance up to, so far this season.
Okay, I'll finish this off because we do have to take a break, and then we're going to get into the Hall of Fame stuff on the other side. But the reality is when I look at Aaron Sanchez, I see a guy that could be there 8 to 10 years. When I look at Marcus Stroman, I look at a year-to-year guy, and I don't know why I look at him that way, because he's done nothing but succeed. And you might want to throw stature into the conversation. I don't know, but one is prototypical. But the prototypical guy is run by Scott Boras, which is also a little bit of a caveat to that conversation. I'm not sure, but if they're going to break this thing down and they're going to change the, quote, culture of the Toronto Blue Jays, there is definitely some culture when it comes to Marcus Stroman and what he brings into that clubhouse. All right, we'll take a break here. When we come back, I was down in Seattle not long ago, and I remember this time last year, everybody was starting to build up the hype on Edgar Martinez. But the new ballot has some pretty big boy names that are going to be on it this year. Mariano Rivera, Roy Halladay, Andy Pettitte. Does Edgar Martinez get 75% this year? Rogers starting to gain a little ground. Barry starting to gain a little ground. Mike Mussina was right there. Mussina, pardon me. I'm just going to call him Moose. With Mariano, Roy, Andy Pettitte, Mike Mussina, the Rocket, and the Big Man, does Edgar Martinez miss out again? We'll get into that conversation. Your calls, your texts, your tweets, your emails. Again, you could join us. We're completely interactive at 604-280-1040. That is KPWE. That is Lou Filippo, Niall O'Donohoe. I'm Rob Fay. This is Vancouver Canadians Game Day on TSN 1040. All right, so just before we went to the break, we set up the fact that the Hall of Fame for 2019 is a very, very intriguing one, because it includes a couple of big names. And I say that tongue firmly planted in cheek. You're looking at names like Mariano Rivera. Yes, please. Andy Pettitte, maybe not a first ballot guy, but definitely a guy that's probably going to find his way in. Roy Oswalt, and then the late Roy Halladay. We will get to Edgar in a second, but gentlemen, I would assume that Mariano Rivera, even as a closer, is a guy that will find his way into Cooperstown. Maybe not a first ballot guy, probably third or fourth ballot that we'll see Mariano go in. Or am I wrong?
I think Rivera is going to challenge for getting among the closest to 100%. I think he's getting 96 plus.
I think he's a stone cold lock.
Yeah, he's
really.
He is,
definitely
he is a closer. I don't know what I'm seeing here.
He's not a closer. He is the closer. Like he's.
See, Trevor Hoffman's thinking I was the closer too. Eckersley, Lee Smith, those guys all thought they were the closer too.
But he's been on the big stage,
Exactly.
He's done it.
So there's a New York bias. Are you saying that because he's in New York, that just bumps him up?
Well, he's done it on the big stage. I think you can't discount that. I mean, that's the biggest pressure-packed situation is to pitch in New York.
I mean, whenever they talk about kind of the advent of the reliever, the guy who was different was Rivera, who would come out and get 6 outs. Sometimes he'd get 9 outs. And he did it on the big stage over and over and over again. And when you look at that whole body of work, I mean, it really is, he's so unique among closers because his excellence lasted a good 17 to 18 years. Hoffman has great numbers. He had a really, really good 10-year run and then some crappy years around it. Rivera, from the moment he inherited the job from John Wetland to the day he retired, was the guy coming out of the pen. He's the standard. He is the Babe Ruth of closers.
He had a couple of hiccups in the postseason, but just a couple in the 2004 against the Red Sox in the ALCS and in the 2001 World Series. But other than that, he was lights out in the postseason, and that's the biggest stage. And it doesn't matter if it was New York, but he delivered in the postseason. And after 7 innings, if you don't have the lead against that team, you knew that you were in trouble because, as Lou said, Rivera would come in routinely for those last 6 outs.
Fair enough, but this goes back to the argument, closers. And the reason I bring this up, and I'm glad that you all just fell into the trap, is if you are so quick to put a closer on your first ballot, why has it taken Edgar as a DH this long to still not get in when some would say he might be the best hitter of his generation outside of a guy like Tony Gwynn?
He doesn't even have 3,000 hits.
But that's not the point.
Well, okay,
everybody
but
assumes that he's the best DH to ever play Major League Baseball.
Well, see, I would argue that he is the best DH to ever play Major League Baseball. And as much as I dislike the Boston Red Sox, there's a fellow named David Ortiz who, if I was to say greatest DH ever, it's him.
Yeah.
The one thing he did was hit. Harold Baines went through this as well. Everyone thought Harold Baines, greatest DH ever. But then when you scale him against the other hitters, I mean, it's different. I think Edgar gets in.
Do people really look at Ortiz as strictly a DH, though? Because when you think of Edgar, you think of solely a DH.
But he played third for a while.
Yeah, that's right.
But very early on.
And when's the last time Ortiz played a field position except in desperation or during a World Series? He DH'd 150 games a year.
Yeah.
Fair enough. And Ortiz is a first ballot guy because he played in Boston and he hits the long ball.
Man, he had a lot of long balls.
He hit it. Fair enough.
Yeah.
So again, to come back to where I'm going for, we're totally okay putting quote a DH in. We're totally okay putting quote a closer in.
Yeah.
None of these are marquee positions and that's by just simple baseball logic. Why doesn't Edgar get in? Because he doesn't have 400 home runs, or because he doesn't have 3,000 hits?
What's his signature moment in the playoffs?
His consistency. Well, but you don't judge necessarily by the postseason.
I ignore playoffs. There's a lot of guys who didn't get there. I mean, if you're good, you're good, But I think the thing with Edgar is once again, as a hitter, when you compare all of these things, I mean, he was primarily a DH, but he's a hitter. It's different than being a.
What do you put more value on in baseball, a DH or a closer?
A closer.
Closer.
Than a DH that could come in and hit 330 a season?
Or a closer who can toss you an ERA under 2 for 10 years.
Closer comes in 45 times a year.
But Mariano Rivera was that closer that came in 60 to 70 times a year.
That's fair. But now you're talking about the greatest closer in history.
And that's why he's a first ballot guy, because he is the greatest closer in history. Okay, I'll concede
on that. But I still, like I said, my problem is that Edgar Martinez, and trust me, I'm not a Mariners fan by training. Yeah. But what I'm saying here is you listen to the fact that Mariano's going to get in right away. David Ortiz is going to get in right away. So you lose the stigma of the fact that it's a quote DH, and you lose the stigma of the fact that it's a closer who only comes in 45, 50, or as you said with Mariano, 65 to 70 times a game. Because that has always been the knock. Well, you can't put a DH into the Hall of Fame first time through, but yet the second you mention a DH that's got sexier numbers or comes from a bigger market like New York or Boston, now all of a sudden nobody looks at that title when Edgar's been fighting that for pretty much his entire ballot.
Well, I think Edgar was kind of a one-dimensional player. He didn't steal. He could hit, yes. He wasn't a home run hitter. His lifetime average is 312. But he was so
Edgar
far away from
Martinez is a one-dimensional hitter?
Well, I wouldn't go that far.
Boy,
I mean,
KP, that's rough.
If you were to go backwards a bit and compare him to a guy who really did not get a lot of respect for how well he could hit because he was a DH, you'd have to go back to what's his name? Played in KC in the 80s.
Hal McRae.
Hal McRae was the same kind of player, and that was a team that had postseason success.
Yep.
But it's a different kind of thing here. I do think he's going to get in. He's really, really close, and this may be the year to do it because there's really only one shoe in at the top. But, all-time DHs, maybe probably falls, say maybe in the 3 to 6 range. I don't think he's top 2 when it's all said and done. I think right now Ortiz is number 1. And if you were to ask me off the cuff, I'd say another guy I can think about who DH'd for a really, really long time was Don Baylor, who was a much more feared hitter than, say, Edgar Martinez.
Edgar gets in this year, though.
I think he gets in this year. I think he gets in this year, yeah.
I'm surprised the Mariners haven't already started their Hall of Fame push. You know how every team comes out.
You really think they would, based on the situation here, that almost kind of like how college teams do the old Heisman thing. I mean, we're only looking at picking up like an extra 50 votes.
I have a feeling they're probably going to ramp up real soon, though.
Well, yeah, it's his last ballot. So. You got to make the go. Maybe they're confident. Roger Clemens, Barry Bonds are heading on to their 7th ballot. Both of them made headway last year, where they jumped up to a number, of course, Clemens at 57, Bonds at 56, where if they get into the 60s, now all of a sudden you're starting to say, these guys legitimately have a shot. I'm not worried. The conversation isn't about whether Clemens or Bonds will get in. Whose votes are they taking away? And the reason I bring it up is a guy like Roy Halladay is going to be put on the ballot this year. Now, everybody assumes that Halladay would have been on the ballot for maybe 2 to 3 years and eventually found his way on once the Jeters of the world flew past and, the ones that we know are no-brainers. But the passing of Roy Halladay, and I say this as delicately as I can, probably expedites his entry into Cooperstown. Is that a fair statement to say?
Without a question. Absolutely, without a question. And once again, when you look at the ballot this year, you don't want to say it's a good time to take that away, but based on the shoo-ins, he definitely rises to probably number 2 in the first-year class behind Rivera, which probably means he's going to get enough to slide in.
Okay, so here's where we're at right now. You say that Edgar Martinez on his final ballot will get in. You've got Mariano as a lock. He's in.
Yep.
Mike Mussina was at 63. He would need a significant jump to get in, but it's only his 6th ballot. But the guys that are coming to the year after are going to take votes away from him. Is Mike Mussina being affected by Roger Clemens and Barry Bonds? Because they're essentially taking votes away. You get 10 votes.
I don't know if he's affected by it. I mean, Mussina was one of those guys that was an innings eater who had a very nice ERA. Not a great ERA, a nice ERA. Call him Jack Morris 2. Roy Halladay was the best pitcher in the majors, clean pitcher, if I may say, for a stretch of about 10 to 12 years. If he did not play for the Toronto Blue Jays during a good chunk of his career, he probably would have won 2 or 3 more Cy Youngs. He has a perfect game, and he has a no-hitter in the playoffs as well in his first playoff start. He left Toronto on very good terms, and he retired in a very, very classy manner. He did drop off at the end when he got injured, but he didn't attempt multiple comebacks. His down period was very, very short, and all these writers who vote and the players, if they think back on who was the best pitcher during that time, they're going to say Roy Halladay. I think he gets in first ballot.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's just a shame that it was only until the latter half of his career he finally got the recognition that he so richly deserved. Certainly, I got to see him pitch quite a lot when I was in Ontario, living around central Ontario. I got to see Roy Halladay a lot, and really, he was the reason why it was good to be a Blue Jays fan. May have been the only good reason during those days.
Okay, so you got Rivera first ballot, Roy Halladay first ballot, Edgar on his 10th and final ballot in. Is that it?
It might be. You might see somebody else sneak up, but there's a lot of guys there that are going to get votes, and you can vote for 10. So it's going to be dispersed. And there's a lot of guys there that, like you look at Mussina, Clemens, Bonds. If there's one guy who's going to make a jump, well, actually, I can't even see it because there's reasons for all of them. Schilling's certainly not making a jump because his public persona is
Nobody
gone.
likes him.
Exactly.
Nobody likes him, but he's a Hall of Famer.
I swear to God, that's why both Jack Morris and Burt Blyleven got into the media, is because their perception amongst the media and the voters was not good. Yeah. So if Jack Morris is thinking, boy, if I play nice in the sandbox, if Burt Blyleven says, boy, I play nice in the sandbox for 2-3 years, slap some of those little kids who all of a sudden have a Writers of America, opportunity here, I'll get in. Burt Blyleven got in, but a lot of people didn't think that he had anything that was above and beyond. I love Jack Morris as the Bulldog guy. In a one game off, I'd be more than happy to take him. But he doesn't have sexy numbers either.
No.
But again, you play nice with the younger generation. You let them teach how to tweet and how to Snapchat. You let them do all the stuff that they do. And the next thing you know, all of a sudden, you're that good guy. You slap a couple of backs, hang out and have a couple of beers with them. And I honestly think that helps. Yeah. So the question is, Clemens Bonds. Is this the ballot that sets them up for entry in year 8?
Maybe sets them up. Might move them up into the high 60s, low 70s. But, as we're going through this list and looking at it again, I think only 3 guys are getting in this year, not including the veterans.
All right, fair enough. Those are your 3?
Yep,
Mariano, Halladay, and Edgar Martinez.
Yes.
Are we fair across the board on that?
Yep.
Yeah, I'd say so.
I do have a question. Why isn't Jeff Kent getting more momentum?
Well, there's a lot of other guys there who are great position players. I don't get it with Kent either.
Here's the deal. Let's hold that thought because Jeff Kent is to Mariano as Robinson Cano is to Plank. Hold that thought. When we come back, we'll kick this tire as well. Vancouver Canadians open up in just a couple of weeks. On the other side of the break, we are going to give you a 4-pack of tickets to opening day, which is June the 20th, right around the corner. Probably a nice night like this. We'll have you out to the ballpark. So don't call us just yet at 604-280-1040. But when we come back, KP is going to open up his shirt. All the buttons will be exposed, and he will have 4 tickets on the inside to opening night. You call, you get them. You may have to pick them up right off of his chest, but they're yours if you can do it. I'm Rob Fay. This is Vancouver Canadians Game Day on TSN10. Were you the one that told me that the Raiders, somebody had bandied about the thought of adding gold into their uniform when they moved to Las Vegas?
Yes, that was some talk that they were going to add gold to the jerseys, which is
sacrilege.
No, absolutely. Yeah. I'm a longtime Raider fan. I can proudly say that, even though they've sucked for a long time. They are the silver and black. If you change that, you might as well just throw it away.
What would you go? Would you go silver, gold, and black, or
no?
Just gold and black?
You just can't add any gold because those are the Niners colors.
I'm not saying that it's my decision to do it. I'm just saying, wasn't that being discussed not that long ago?
Yeah, it was because the Vegas Golden Knights, they have a little bit of gold if you look at their jerseys, and they wanted to add some gold to the Raiders. And as Lou said, you heard the sigh from him. It's not good.
There's lots of sighs from Lou.
Silver and black is intimidating. You throw some gold in there, I'm sorry, not going to work.
It's true. And they have one of the best logos of all time.
The best logo of all time.
We're so biased.
No, it's not the best logo of all time.
I don't know, Lou, would you say it's the best logo?
It's about as good as it gets if you think about it.
Two against one.
It's the
But we haven't heard from KP yet.
It's the Raiders. It's the Raiders. They're on a different level.
Best logo.
I'm not a Raiders fan, so I can't comment on that. But
you're such a wimp. Come on, step up and help the old guy out, would you? So did you say, speaking of logos, Buffalo, AAA of the Toronto Blue Jays, coming out with a limited edition uniform. They're changing their name to the Buffalo Wings, which is genius.
Yes.
Hot Wings. So their hat is red and the logo, in order to get to the B for Buffalo, is a drumstick of a chicken wing, and the bottom circle of the B is the ranch dressing. Now, the best part about it is the uniform is red, the pants are white, and the socks, which are knee-high, are both celery green.
Sacrilege. It should be blue cheese with wings, but that's a story.
You know what? Maybe it is blue cheese. Ooh, I don't know. But anyways, great.
That's pretty cool.
It's very smart.
That is cool. I also like what the Bisons have done with they had a Blue Jays weekend they've been doing it now. I think this season adopting Blue Jays style uniforms from the 70s, the powder blues.
Well, rumor
I think that looks really nice.
I have not made this official, nor have I heard that it's official, but I heard the Canadians might be doing the same thing.
No way.
That's true story.
That would be cool.
Apparently, rumor has it, I haven't actually gotten confirmation of this yet, is they got a Blue Jay night and an Expo night.
Very nice.
Yes, very nice. And an old beer can Vancouver Canadians night. That we can confirm because it's on the pocket schedule. So there's 3 jersey throwback nights. One of them will be to the 1990s Vancouver Canadians, the tribute to the guys from the old Pacific Coast League, which is very cool. And then the other ones, I think, and I haven't heard confirmation on this, it might just be the beer can logo 3 times, but I think they're trying to do the Blue Jay one where it's the Canadians uniform but in Blue Jay font.
Nice.
And then they're going to do one like the Expos, which they did do last year. That wouldn't be the first one.
Right.
I did that broadcast that night when it was the Tim Raines night, and I switched the Everett Aqua Sox roster for the old Montreal Canadiens roster. Or Montreal Expos roster party. That'd be better if it was the Canadians. Guy Lafleur missed the fly ball. He's too busy smoking up against the railing. All right, so let's get back to this very quickly. I just want to close up shop on it. I know we're up against the clock as well. We were talking about the acceleration of Roy Halladay because of his passing. I don't think that's a mean thing to say. I think that's a realistic thing to say. Because it's fresh in all the writers' minds, they understand his impact on the game, that he will probably go into Cooperstown this year. Is that a general consensus across the board? That had he not passed away, he may have had to wait a couple of years, whereas because he did pass away, this accelerates his induction?
I mean, there's still a possibility he would have gotten in, because like I said, it's not a very deep class. And really, when you look at the pitchers that are out there who are starters, with the exception of Clemens, who's a different story, I think numbers across the board, when you look at the important numbers for pitchers, he still kind of comes out on top. So he may have gotten in, but I think really, being that it's so fresh in the minds, it's going to push him over the top.
Okay, let's switch gears. We'll talk about one of the classiest guys in Major League Baseball history to a guy that is usually pretty classy as well. Before we get to that, let's get to the winner of the tickets. He's been waiting patiently. Should we get to the winner? Let's do this. Chris in Vancouver, you've been patient. How are you, fella?
Fine. Good.
We were going to ask you a skill testing question, but I figure anybody that waits as long as you waited on the phone, they're yours for free. Sounds good?
Sounds okay, yeah.
All right, so you're going to opening night to see the Vancouver Canadians and the Everett Aqua Sox. That's the future of the Mariners and the future of the Blue Jays, 7:05 on June the 20th. You can make it, right?
June 20th, yeah, that's perfect.
Perfect. Good stuff. Hold the line. Chantella's got you. I appreciate you listening, and thank you for the patience, Chris. You're a good man.
Awesome, yeah.
All right. I think he needs some water. He's waiting for a while. It's okay. Okay, Joey Votto. Obviously, a mistake from a PR perspective, a mistake from an aesthetic perspective, but he was very quick to write this, which some debate he even needed to do, but he did it anyway because he knew how many cages he rattled. Joey Votto, KP, I'll start with you. Joey Votto comes out and obviously says, could care less about Canada, da-da-da, what have they done for me lately, yada, 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 but is very quick to circle back and say, yeah, I really blew it. Do you accept his apology, or do you think it was PR?
I would accept his apology, because if you don't forgive him, you don't forget about this, it doesn't help, because the guy has come out and said his sorry, and let's move on. But the other point I want to make is that it's refreshing sometimes to hear guys speak their mind, and oftentimes we get cliches, in terms of answers from ball players, from hockey players, or any other sport. So I think sometimes it is kind of neat to hear what players really think. So do I think he needed to apologize for it? I think a lot of Canadians were offended by that. So that's kind of the consensus. You look on Twitter and social media. But again, for me, as a fan, I feel that, hey, this guy's speaking his mind. We don't hear that a lot from players. Usually we hear cliched answers. So I would say, I don't blame him for what he says, and I forgive him for his apology.
If I was playing for a team that was chugging along at about a 300 clip, knowing that I'm stuck there and going to be chugging along at a 300 clip for quite a few years, and someone comes up to my face and says, hey, what do you think about how that other Canadian guy did up there? I'd be surprised if there weren't some expletives in there. I mean, we know the guy's a competitor, and let's face it, he's not in a good situation. Well, why do you walk up to him and say, hey, what do you think about all this other stuff that's going on?
Canada's fault he's in that situation.
No, I know that, but I mean, this is just stuff that's going to come out of your mouth as you're going, because it's like, oh, this Canadian player, this, and that, and it's like, I don't think he needs to apologize. Guys blowing off some steam, which, quite frankly, I wouldn't be surprised if he's doing that more often.
Well, obviously, it wasn't well thought out, but my God, if he said that about America, perhaps, boy, things would really erupt. But I think it's probably just. I think he kind of attributed it to, frustration with the Blue Jays when he was ignored, basically, in the draft. And I've said this off mic quite a few times, how the Blue Jays did not pick up on Joey Votto in their own backyard just remains one of the.
It's all right. They made a few mistakes over the years.
They have, but right in your backyard.
I brought it up last night, and I didn't take a lot of heat for it, nor do I think it was worthy. But you know what? As a guy that works in public relations, when he was having his conversation with Jamie Campbell on TV, he was wearing his Humboldt Broncos T-shirt. Now, I know he wears it a lot, but that to me struck a little pandering nerve with me. I thought that was a little over the top. And you know what? I understand he's paying tribute. He wears that green and gold shirt all the time, but I would have just gone with a Cincinnati Reds pullover, just kept it real simple, maybe a Baseball Canada pullover. To me, that was a little excessive, trying to get the point home. But again, it's Joey Votto. He marches to his own drum, and we all dance to the beat. All right, 1 hour down, 1 hour to go as we wrap up segment 1 of Vancouver Canadians Game Day, powered as always by Booster Juice. Now, on the other side of the break, Robinson Cano was drinking some of his own juice that had its own boost in it. Did it affect his candidacy for the Hall of Fame? Or was Robinson Cano even a Hall of Famer to begin with? We'll get into that debate and much more. You're listening to Vancouver Canadians Game Day right here on TSN 1040. Lou Filippo, KP Wee, Niall O'Donoghue, glad that you're here. Trust me, there's a lot to get into in the second hour that we haven't even touched on in the first hour. And we'll dabble with the Toronto Blue Jays. We'll dabble with the Mariners. But Robinson Cano, you had to know that this response to what he did was not going to be met well. There are certain guys you can scratch your head and say, boy, maybe they were a little naive. Of course, you get 80 games. Major League Baseball's penalties are pretty severe, but Robinson Cano is an upper echelon player. If it's a newbie that just came in and didn't realize that Dristan is on the banned list, then cool. But you've got to know when you're a marquee player, a bona fide top 25 player in baseball, that what he did was a no-no. I'm not going to ask you if he knew or not, but who's at fault?
Oh, it's the player. There's no question here.
I think
is
it's
it just the player?
Everybody.
It is everybody.
Yeah, everybody involved.
It's the organization.
Yep.
It's the trainers.
Medical staff. Yep.
100% it is. It has to be.
Well, I mean, the drug that he took was apparently administered in the Dominican Republic. Okay, according to his story,
a diuretic.
Oh, and a diuretic. You don't even have to know about drugs. As soon as you say the word diuretic, the layperson knows, oh, it's used for masking steroids. That's what diuretics do. So it's...
When I take a diuretic, I am not masking steroids.
But it's the thing with Cano, okay, and whenever you hear about one of these tests, you go back to the stats and go, let's see. And he was always a great player, just like Barry Bonds was before he started taking the juice. And it's like, 39 home runs, season after hitting 20. That was only 2 years ago. And so now you start thinking about it, because it's like, it kind of makes sense. And, these are athletes. They're proud guys. They're going to do whatever they need to do to succeed. And they cross the line all the time.
And you know what? You brought up Barry Bonds. And even though Barry Bonds has never truly been, guilty, I mean, court of public opinion, he's been guilty. But there's a lot of players, even Mark McGwire, they said he was a Hall of Fame caliber player before he went on the juice. Why would Robinson Cano do this? He's got his money. He's got his legacy. He's got a road or a path to Cooperstown. I don't know how wide that road is, but it's at least pointing in the right direction. I don't understand the logic of this. If you're a borderline bubble guy somewhere between AAA and the majors and you're trying to make it so that you can support your family, or if you're looking for that one big contract, then maybe you'll, think about the old syringe. But there was no benefit to Robinson Cano taking the juice and getting up. He's already got the quan.
I think if you're a professional athlete or any kind of competitive person, you always want to do your best. And if he was, having a mediocre season or he wasn't hitting as well as he could have been, guys always want to look for that extra edge to perform better. And
wait a minute. Didn't he just come off one of his best seasons?
That was
statistically.
That was 2 years ago. He's been actually slowing up a bit since then.
So that's the pressure.
But
that's what KP's saying, right?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, if you're, I would assume if you're like a professional athlete at the highest level, you don't want to embarrass yourself, whether it's at the plate or the base pass or whatever the case may be, and you want to maintain your.
But this is a bigger embarrassment than anything that you wouldn't do in the batter's box clean.
Well, if you got caught.
Yeah, you never think you're going to get caught. I mean, that would be really, really silly. But yeah, I mean, you're getting at that age now. Maybe you're a little bit more sore, and things like that. And who knows exactly if he was masking or what he was masking. We're never going to know that unless he actually comes out and says it. But he is getting at that point in his career, and he still has like $100 million left on his contract. So it's not chicken feed. And I imagine he's too proud to play for it, batting .230, hitting 15 home runs. So yeah, you know what? In November, let's try this, and maybe it's gone by here, and it turns out that it's not. He slipped up.
And it's my understanding, I guess he knew the results back in, was it spring training or April? And I mean, and he still had a pretty good on-base percentage. If you've seen him play second base, he is absolutely amazing. He makes plays that other second basemen just cannot make. And I don't know how he was able to keep focusing on the task at hand, as he knew he was going to be suspended for quite a long time once the news did break. Of course, now he's got a wrist or a hand injury now after getting hit by a pitch. So very convenient timing for that injury to happen.
Well, let's not forget that this was actually on the radar of Major League Baseball for a couple of months. There was an appeal process that was going to take place, and then he rescinded based on the fact that, of course, he had the injury. So if you're going to serve the suspension, you might as well do it while you're, healing up, at least in bits and pieces. That's what we're getting. Diuretic, by the way, for those who are wondering what it is, it works on your kidneys by increasing the amount of salt and water that comes out through your urine. KP wrote this for me. I'm just reading what he wrote. Too much salt can cause extra fluid to build up in your blood vessels, raising your blood pressure. A diuretic will lower your blood pressure by flushing out salt and taking any unwanted extra fluid with it.
And it'll dilute anything else that comes out, so readings will...
Yeah, but so does cranberry juice.
Yeah.
Totally different thing. Most athletes, Olympic athletes, who were caught doping were never caught for the actual drug they took. They were caught for diuretics.
Well, I hope they don't ever test me, because I love me some cranberry juice. All right, Robinson Cano, was he a Hall of Famer before he slipped up, yes or no?
Yes.
He's probably borderline. I wouldn't go an automatic yes, but he was definitely trending there, assuming that he stayed, had a few more good years. I think if he got to 420 in home runs, he's a no-brainer as a second baseman.
Okay, how about this one? Ryan Braun, Hall of Famer?
For his position, his numbers are now trending away from Hall of Famer. His drop's been pretty steep from where he was at his peak, and he's now falling away from that long peak period that you want a Hall of Famer to have.
But if Ryan Braun was a New York Yankee, is he a Hall of Famer?
No, absolutely not.
No, I don't think it makes
playing his position. No.
I mean, Manny Ramirez was a Boston Red Sox, and he's not getting a sniff for a long time.
You think he gets in?
Not anytime soon.
He's 20s, 30s for percentage, which actually surprises me, because I thought he was a media darling, especially at the end of his career. I'm surprised.
Yes, that's right.
I'm actually surprised he's that low as well compared to the other two big doping names that are on there.
All right, so Ryan Dempster is going into the BC Sports Hall of Fame in just a couple of nights' time. By the way, if you get the chance, the silent auction that the BC Sports Hall of Fame has, which is already up online at, ironically enough, bcsportshalloffame.com, or is it CA? I can't remember. Long and the short of it is awesome to see Ryan Dempster get in, a Canadian guy that has done good. He was one of the few to get 100 wins and almost 100 saves. When you look back at Ryan Dempster, What do you remember him for? Because there was a lot of off-the-field stuff, the Harry Carey, the camera work. Or do you remember him for his on-field performances? What's your one Ryan Dempster memory that is not beating A-Rod?
I don't know if you can nail it down to one memory. I mean, I always remember, watching him that he just had this really, really good, I don't know what you want to call it, Canadian demeanor. He was always a good quote. He seemed like he was fun to be around. And there's way too many professional athletes that are just way too serious and way too cranky. He just always seemed to be enjoying what he was doing.
He and Theo Epstein have a unique connection. They both have World Series rings with the Red Sox and the Cubs. Think about that. The two most sought-after rings in maybe pro sports.
Right.
Outside of a Canucks Stanley Cup ring, but we'll save that for another day. And all of a sudden, he's got them both. The kid from Gibson's on the other side of the ferry's got 2 World Series rings. You know what I remember him for? And I say this because, again, and full disclosure, I do know him personally. His final year of his 2-year contract with the Boston Red Sox, he signed, I think it was 2 years, 26 or 27 million, which was split up between the 2 years. He knew he was going to retire heading into his final season with the Red Sox. He gave the second year of his contract back to Boston, saying, I won't take the money. Saying, I'm not going to play for you. Use his money for good. I mean, again, you're giving it back to one of the richest guys in maybe North America, in John Henry. But all of a sudden, Ryan's like, hey, if I'm not going to earn this money, I don't deserve this money. I remember Steve Nash going the opposite way with the Lakers, but I remember Ryan Dempster for the integrity. It takes a lot to look somebody and say, that $13.5 million, I didn't play for it, so I don't deserve it. That, to me, was as Canadian as you'll get from a guy like Ryan Dempster.
Yeah.
For me, what I remember about Dempster's career was the fact that he was able to succeed as a starter and then also have the same amount of success as a closer. I think it's pretty tough to go from one to the other, and that's what I would remember his career for, having, the wins as a starter and also going out there as a closer and getting saves. And that's just something that you don't see a lot. You see that with guys like John Smoltz, Dennis Eckersley, and to be kind of part of that select group, I think that speaks volumes for how he did in the majors.
And he went back to being a starter, which the other two guys never did. They finished off as closers.
He turned his back on Baseball Canada a few times at some of the international events. Do you think he gets a blemish for that?
I don't think so.
Well, you know what? I was at the Dome during the 2000 and trying to remember the year 2009, and I do remember in between innings when Canada was playing the U.S. I remember them showing basically a Team Canada promotional video of all the players who have represented Canada in international play, or just Canadians in general. I think they did briefly show Ryan Dempster on the jumbotron, and there were a lot of boos because a lot of people were pretty upset that he wasn't on the 2009 team, and who knows if had he been there, maybe Canada would have advanced.
Well, and maybe so, but you got to remember he's been through a couple of different injuries over his career, which I think gives him a get out of jail free card. That said, what is the parameter for declining your country? Is it if you're in a contract year? If you're coming off an injury and you're needing the offseason to rehab, what is it?
Because joining a new team, I guess,
or the team doesn't let you. I mean, there's a variety of different ways you would pass up because you look back at just the simplicity. Oh, Ryan Dempster never suited up for Canada. Maybe they could have beaten the U.S. Like you just said. But there are so many secondary reasons that a player will say no. Contract year, injury, team says they don't want them there. Or maybe he's just tired. Who knows? I don't think that's a knock on him. He's gone back to Baseball Canada each year. He still donates to them. But do you think it's a blemish on his career from the common fan?
To me, it's not. Not at all. I mean, as a pitcher, there's a lot of things you have to look at before you commit yourself to something like that. It's the start is way off of your schedule, and he would know that, quite frankly, being the top pitcher on that team, there's a good chance that the competitive juices would get flowing and he might allow himself to be overworked. And at the end of the day, his check is being paid, well, at that time was being paid by the Chicago Cubs. If he pulls something and you're a Cubs fan and we're paying him, $10 million, I ain't going to be happy. It was Mark Cuban who said that. Why should I send my player over there of no benefit to me when they ain't going to win. So
No, it makes perfect sense.
I got no problem with it.
How much do you think Ryan Dempster made in his career? I love this game. I used to play this with former general manager of the Vancouver Canadians, Jason Tackman, all the time.
I looked already at
Oh, did you look? Okay. For those who have not looked, KP, did you look?
No, I don't have internet access here.
KP's.
I'll take a wild guess. 50 million.
How about 150 billion?
$90 million.
I was close.
No,
Low
you
man on the
weren't.
totem pole there.
How do you not have internet? You've been doing all this show off the top of your head?
I'm not connected to Wi-Fi. I don't have a password.
Wow.
That just puts you in a whole different spectrum. Because I'm like, man, KP knows his stuff. He's been doing it off the top of his head. What are you playing? Like Brick Breaker or something over there?
Well, I have notes I compiled before the show, but during the show I don't have access to the internet.
Well, we're going to fix that during this break because Bell has just heard your cry for help. And gosh darn it, you cannot complain about that at this station and
This
get away with
Wi-Fi
it.
is rocket fast.
Yeah, it sure is for those who have it, apparently. KP, you've completely astonished me. I had no idea. All right, we'll take that's terrible. We'll take a break here. On the other side, the Vancouver Canadians have a lot of promotions this year, many of them that you are familiar with. So the question is Vancouver too sophisticated a city to do a one-off promotion like some of the smaller market teams do? For example, there was vasectomy night once in a smaller market town, which I don't know how it would play in Vancouver. KP, you don't have to worry. We won't ask you what a vasectomy is because we know you don't have the internet. We'll take a break. When we come back, we'll see if Vancouver's a little too suave for minor league baseball. We'll explain that a little bit more. This is Vancouver Canadians Game Day, powered by Booster Juice, not by the internet, right here on TSN 1040. 280-1040, 604-280-1040. But there's a little caveat to this one. I've got 4 tickets for any Vancouver Canadian game this year that you want. Not all of them, but you can choose the date. You could do opening night. You could do one of our Superstar Series appearances. You could do a Family Fun Sunday. You could do whatever the heck you want. I will open up the phones to you right now at 604-280-1040. And it looks like we already, believe it or not, have our winner in the blink of an eye, which is very, very cool. So again, any night, that's a pretty cool giveaway. 4 tickets, you choose the night. You can do a fireworks night. Again, you got to remember that the Vancouver Canadians open up in just a couple of weeks' time, coming off a season where they had 239,000 fans in the regular season, 261,000 fans if you add the playoffs. It's not a bad year. Let's go to Sean, who's out in Mission. Sean, good evening. How are you, fella?
I am doing well, thank you.
Good. Now, you'd have to leave pretty early from Mission if you're going to make a Vancouver Canadians game, no?
Depends. It depends. I work out of Coquitlam, so...
Oh, fantastic. That's easy then.
Maybe able to leave from there.
Well, here's how we're going to do this. You have just won 4 tickets to see any one Canadians game you want this year.
That is super.
Yeah, you can pick opening night.
I grew up at Coquitlam, and I haven't been out there in 25 years.
Well, then, you know what? It's about time we welcome you home.
Thank you very, very much.
That's my pleasure, Sean. You hold the line. The lovely Chantel will take all of your pertinent information, and I will see you at the ballpark. Good stuff. I like when we get winners like that. Guys that haven't been out for a little while, and boy, the ballpark's changed a lot since 25 years ago.
It's changed a lot in the last 10 years.
Absolutely.
What has changed the most? I mean, okay, so I took my first job as the field reporter alongside Brooke Ward, who was the play-by-play guy, and it was Lowell Ulrich doing color for the TV broadcasts in the late 90s. I was the young, highbrow field reporter that interviewed a young Branch Rickey and all that stuff. And I remember it was a one-level fence. It had the dot matrix video board that sometimes worked, and they only had a 1-foot hot dog. And Torchy was the guy that used to do the concessions, and Bill Posthumus was the groundskeeper. It was good times back then, but I go out there now, and I'm like, man, if you haven't been out to the ballpark in some time, you wouldn't recognize it.
No, I mean, it changed very rapidly, and it changed in all the right ways. I mean, the food got awesome, right? The improvements to the actual stadium, the picnic area down one side, the grandstand in left is great. It's great. Really needed to happen. The shortening of the fence. Because you remember...
That's a big one.
That's a big one.
A lot of people don't know that. A lot of people think that the porch was the only thing that made the fence shorter. So Jake Kerr, Jeff Mooney, and Andy Dunn buy the team in 2007. The first thing they did was bring the fence in foul pole to foul pole, 15 feet. Nobody knows that, but that is a huge difference. Wow. Think about that, 15 feet all the way around. Because it happened 12 years ago now, people forget that. But that, Lou, you might hit the nail right on the head. That might be the biggest change that nobody knows about at that ballpark.
Really?
Yeah.
That's, wow.
Used to be 400 to center. It's 385. It's 385 to center now. I mean, the fence is still as high as a tower.
And it's still hard to hit home runs at that Billy Stadium.
But imagine
some of the players I've talked to.
Absolutely.
It's tough place.
We were fortunate back then to see any home runs hit. And I can't remember the fellow's name. I think it was 2009, hit 15. And it seemed like...
A.J. Kirby Jones.
Yeah. And to hit 15 with that as your home park is phenomenal.
That's before the porch went in.
Yep. You go to every other park, and there's cheap shots everywhere. Anything hit out of Nat Bailey, you earned it.
I did a story at CanadiansBaseball.com just the other day where I said, okay, here's your 4 championship teams, 2011, 2012, 2013, and then, of course, recently 2017. Of all the pitchers that played for those 4 teams, 11 had Syndergaard, Sanchez, Nicolino. 2012 had Osuna as Stroman. 2013 is a bit of an anomaly, and then he had Big Nate from 2017. My rotation included Nate Pearson. It also included Roberto Osuna, Marcus Stroman, Aaron Sanchez, and, of course, Thor, Noah Syndergaard. That's a pretty good rotation at any level. I mean, Nate Pearson's body of work is very small by sample size compared to the other guys, but think about that rotation if they could have kept the boys all together.
Well, we've had that discussion before in terms of some of the trades that have been made and the reasoning behind it. I mean, you can throw onto that list, even though he never played here, of course, was Paxton, who was drafted around that same time.
09, right?
Yeah, they could have
09, yeah, I believe it was 09. Yep.
Yeah, because he went back to Kentucky, and then the Mariners took him.
9 or 10.
I want to say 2009. Yeah. I mean, you split the difference. But
but you know what? There's a lot of major league teams that, if you go through a spell like the Jays did in the, 4 or 5 years ago where they were on the cusp and building a team to contend, you're gonna trade away prospects. It happens. Mm-hmm. It just so happens that they were filthy rich in pitchers at the time, and they brought back pitchers. They didn't give them away for trash when they made the trade. It's part of the cost of doing business.
And sometimes, pitchers, they don't work out. And a prime example would be Justin Nicolino. So far, he was lights out when he pitched at Nat Bailey Stadium in 2011, but has struggled to, stay in the big leagues. I believe he's pitching in AAA for the Cincinnati organization. So sometimes, if you keep them, things don't work out, or you trade them away, they don't do so well for another team. So with pitchers, sometimes it's hard to gauge. So I would say that even if they had Paxton, or if they had signed Paxton, who knows how things would have developed.
That's a guy I'd go back and get. Justin Nicolino. I think he's like that guy that you left behind on the Warfield. I'd go back and drag his carcass back to the the tent.
That 1 year when the 3 of them were there, right? We always had that discussion. Which one would you keep? Which one would you keep? And at that time, I'd keep Nicolino.
I had Syndergaard.
Yeah, you had Syndergaard, but everyone had somebody else. Like you could make an argument for any of them, and it's the way it's turned out right now. It looks like it's Syndergaard, Sanchez.
Sanchez was timid for me. Like, Sanchez was young. Like, he was living with his mom and dad the whole life. Nicolino was obviously, a really cool thing about Justin Nicolino. So he gets his signing bonus, and he takes, I guess, $50,000. And his family said, we're storing all the money away. You get $50,000. So he goes to a bar, which I won't name, on Granville Street. And he goes up to the manager and he says, listen, I play for the Vancouver Canadians. Here's my credit card. When it gets to $35,000, call me. But any player on my team that comes in and drinks at your bar says this key name, and you put it on my tab for the whole season.
For the whole season.
The Vancouver Canadians drank on Justin Nicolino. Now, half of them couldn't have drank, but the reality is some of them dipped their toe into the old waters once in a while, and Nicolino, the good man that he was, picked up the tab for the entire season, which I'll never forget. One of again, I don't know what everybody thinks of that, but I thought that was a pretty cool gesture that a young guy like that knows that, hey, not everybody signs for $1 million or $500,000. Some of the guys got $1,000 in their plane ticket. Those are the guys that usually take you up on those kind of things. And Justin Nicolino was a man of his word. I always thought that was really cool.
Yeah. One of my best memories of him when he was with the Canadians is that I'd been with you, Rob, for 3 years of the Oakland times, where quite frankly their whole idea was, let's use as many pitchers as we can for as few pitches. And then when Nicolino came around, we started having 2-hour ball games, and it was just not throwing any balls, always in control, and we get done. It was the season that he had with the Canadians has to rank among the absolute best short season pitching seasons.
Absolutely. It seemed like every time he went out there, it was 5 innings, no hits, 5 innings, 1 hit ball. He was pitching shutout baseball. But he had they all had pitch count limits, so he couldn't stay or pitch longer. But every time he went out, it was a fast game, a quick game, and he would not give up any runs, especially at Nat Bailey Stadium.
Okay, we have to get into this because we promised that we would. Promotions. Nat Bailey Stadium came out with their promotional schedule about a month ago, so it's been out there. It's not really new news. But again, you've got the A&W Family Fun Sundays, you got the fireworks extravaganzas, you got opening night, the Dog Day of Summer, the staples. But very rarely over the last couple of years have the Vancouver Canadians gone off the beaten path. They'll bring Superstar Series appearance guys like Mookie Wilson and Bill Buckner. Now we can say that we've had both ends of that storied 1986 play. Need Ray Knight jumping up and down in the background. But I sit here and I say to myself, would a silly promotion work in a city like Vancouver as a one-off?
I think it could work as long as it's not too silly. But
well, for example, not to cut you off, let's use the ones that other teams use, like Star Wars Night, where the jersey looks like you're a Wookiee, or just basic nights. Like, to me, and Niall brought up a really good one. He said, "Well, what about seated toilet cushion night?" Or what was it?
It was padded. It was
a padded toilet seat. I think that'd be fantastic.
Yeah,
I think that'd be amazing. And not to steal your thunder, but it should be shaped like a C.
Now I know what to get Rob for his birthday.
Just make sure it's new.
No, I mean, something like that could certainly work.
I think with goofy jersey, I think a lot of guys in the press box would have a fit, because from the guys I've talked to, sitting in the press box at Nat Bailey Stadium, they like the traditional jerseys, uniforms that the Canadians have, and for a lot of the guys that follow the team, even the staffers, I think that having some kind of a strange looking uniform, even for one night, that might be a little bit over the top.
By the way, do you have internet now?
Yes, I do.
Red Canada Day jerseys, that went over pretty well.
Oh, the Red Canada Day jersey was awesome, but it was hard to see the number because they had the maple leaf in the back, which was kind of bizarre.
Yeah, I mean, for one game, you don't see the
But
numbers.
that's not really weird.
That's not that weird.
We're talking about creative ones. So, for example, the Stockton Ports have Asparagus Night, which I don't know how that would do. Muggsy Bogues made an appearance with the Charlotte Knights. There's Nothing Night, where they actually don't let fans into the stadium.
That's right, for the first 5 innings, I believe. So it's
an empty stadium. Yeah. You know what I always thought would be cool for a baseball game? And again, we'll take our final break here in just a second, but no music. No PA, no announcements. Just 9 innings of silent baseball.
Don Andrews is on the phone right now.
Well, and that's fine. We'll pay him regardless, handsomely at that. But think about that. I've always said that a hockey game, like, could you imagine going to the Canucks game and there was no video board, there was no rink, ribbon or whatever, and it was just the swish of the blades. You could actually hear the odd F-bomb and all that kind of stuff. Like, to me, as great a production and presentation as sports has become, I would love one night, silent night, where all you got was just the crack of the bat and the roar of the crowd.
You have more people on their phones the whole time. I would think.
Yeah, I agree with KP. Absolutely.
I mean,
that's exactly what
I would certainly enjoy something like that, because I do love being able to hear the sound of the ball hitting the catcher's mitt. And actually, if you didn't have that ancillary noise, the sound of the guys running around the bases, which is something that you would remember playing baseball as a child or an adult, that kind of digging in of the cleats, it'd be a totally different experience. And it would be very, very interesting. I don't know if you can actually pull off a total silent night, because Vancouver does have some pretty rowdy fans when things are going well.
Nah, I'm just saying, I think that'd be kind of cool. The other ones that are out there is Better Call Saul night. I'm not really sure. Jesus. You got Wilmer. Yeah, you got Wilmer Flores bobblehead. I'm not sure what that's a big deal, but the number one ranked one is Glenn Hubbard Snake Night.
Glenn Hubbard.
I don't even know. I guess Glenn Hubbard, the former Atlanta Brave, had a pet snake. Well, looks like the promo schedule says that anybody that has a snake gets in for free.
Oh, great.
Dude, could you imagine?
No.
I would not even work that night.
No.
That's pretty funny.
No. I remember once.
I like snakes.
I was working for the competing radio station in this city, and they sent me down to do the 420 festival at the art gallery before it got like real big. And I'm not lying. Secondhand smoke, I was there. Like, I was all in. And then all of a sudden, one of the guys beside me is like, I'm not even saying this to make you laugh. He's like, dude, where's my snake? And I just looked around. I'm like, what? So there's like 10 people, like a bunch of hippies, looking for a boa constrictor in the grass at the art gallery. I was out of there. I wanted no part of that. And then the guy's like, oh yeah, I found it. It's here. And then once I was down by Wreck Beach. There's a little barbecue area by there, and they had a music festival. They were all sausages, by the way. So anyhow, long and the short of it is I was waiting for the little toilet, little cubicle, the porta potty, and the guy opens the door, and he's got a boa constrictor around his neck. I was done. I can't do snakes, man.
Really?
Yeah, I swear to God.
No, I love
Same here. Cannot do it.
You love snakes,
absolutely.
Well, maybe there's a promotion to be had yet. Who knows? We'll have to see. KP, what's your big fear? No internet.
Snakes would be one. Anything that's related to insects. I don't know. Hate those things.
Traditional 3 stats.
Yes. By the way, this one coming into us at 1040. They have tried silent nights in hockey and football, and it just does not work. Chantel Chan says we need to take a break. Therefore, we need to take a break. When we come back, our final segment. That is KP Wee, Lou Filippo, Niall O'Donohoe. I'm Rob Fay. This is Vancouver Canadians Game Day. Snake free right here on TSN 10. KP Wee, Lou Filippo, Niall O'Donohoe. I'm Rob Fay, and welcome back to Vancouver Canadians Game Day, powered as always by Booster Juice. Now, we get into the Toronto Blue Jays. We talk about them. The Seattle Mariners, we talk about them. Blue Jays are going to hover around 500 for a little bit. But all of a sudden, I look at the Mariners in what and again, debatable, I consider one of the toughest divisions in baseball, if not the toughest. And they're kind of hanging tough, like the old new kids on the block. It's 40 some odd games into the season. How many games would it take for you to be a true believer?
Well, I mean, they're going after the wild card spot. They're not going to challenge you.
For sure.
Yeah. That second wild card spot, historically, tradition, I mean, if you can hang around 500, you got a chance at grabbing that at the end. I don't think it really says much getting that spot anymore. I don't really think it makes you a contender, but they've got enough to hang around, assuming that they don't miss Cano as much as we think.
Yeah, that's a pretty big blow. Before we get to you, Niall, we're going to go to the phones here. Very rarely do we call somebody back, but this guy, Ken, in Vancouver, you said you've been trying to petition for tickets for weeks. Are you ready to get your tickets, fella?
Yeah, I'm ready. Weeks might have been overstatement. It's about a week and a half.
Well, come on.
Yeah, I was hoping you and myself and Aziz and Chantal could go to the game together, opening day.
What? You're asking me to go to the game with you? I'm already going to be there. I got a job to do. I got to work there.
Oh, come on. Pass it off.
Lou, do you want to do the game opening night?
I'm going to be sitting in the stands as well.
How about this? Can Lou sit in for me?
Absolutely.
Fantastic. KP's like, what about me? I just got my internet fixed. Well, I'll tell you what, Ken, hold the line. We're going to get all your information. You're going to the game, all right?
Sounds good. Thank you, sir.
That's what happens when you text into 104040. Good things can come your way. I think I might have just hung up on him as well. Okay, so very quickly to circle back towards the Seattle Mariners, Niall. I always use the All-Star break as kind of the gauge, as who's in, who's out. Is that too late in the season?
You know what? I'm pretty impressed with what the Mariners have been doing. I mean, they have been really banged up. They're going to be without Robinson Cano for quite a while. I know Nelson Cruz got banged up. He took a pitch on the foot there the other day.
Came back negative, though, right?
Yeah. And, they had bit of the Ichiro drama as well. With Ben Gamble, he was out for a while. Mitch Haniger's really stepped it up this year. Kyle Seager looks like he's coming into form. Mike Zunino. People are talking about him as being one of the biggest Mariners draft busts now. Like he really made a statement last year, and he's good for the odd mammoth home run. I've been pretty impressed considering they're somehow managing to put it together. Felix Hernandez, he's not the same old Felix Hernandez from before, but they just seem to be able to just keep on trucking.
I would agree with you on Mike Zunino being a bust. I will say he hit the biggest home run I've ever seen in Northwest League history off of Zach Bro.
Wow.
A ball that still hasn't landed yet. How about this? Canadians were up 6-1 going to the bottom of the ninth in Everett. Aqua Sox tie it 6-6. It goes to the 10th. Zach Bro throws a first pitch fastball. It was the night that Osuna struck out 13.
Okay, yeah.
6-6 game. It goes to the 10th. First pitch that young Canadian-born Zach Bro throws to Mike Zunino, and he hits this thing to the moon. Oh my God. And the game was over like that. Canadians should have won that. Osuna got a no decision, and Bob's your uncle.
I want to go back to what Lou said earlier about the wild card again. Here's where I disagree with Lou in the fact that if you get that wild card spot, you have a shot. I mean, look at the Kansas City Royals from 2014. They were the wild card. They were one of the wild card teams. They beat Oakland in the wild card game, swept the Angels, I believe, in the division series.
I think that's right. Yeah, the Angels
swept the Orioles in the championship series and got to the World Series against the Giants.
Yep.
Anything's possible if you're hot, if you get clutch hitting at the right spot, if you get good pitching. Anything's possible. So, I mean, I would say, like, if the Mariners are, around the, I guess if they're hovering around maybe a couple games back of the second wild card, I would say you go for it. I know
KP's a believer.
When you look at their underlying numbers, okay, quite frankly, I mean, the record looks nice, but eventually you become what you are. They're batting worse than the Blue Jays, and they're almost as bad as the Jays are pitching. And we're not talking about the Jays fighting for a wild card spot right now. We're talking about them trying to keep their head above water. They are what they are. They're a team that is pretty bad at hitting and pretty bad at pitching, but they're winning games over 162 games. That's going to flip.
Well, do I see the Mariners contending? I don't. But again, as a fan, or I'm not a fan of theirs, but their fan base, they have to keep hoping.
No, I'm buying in on the Mariners right now. I mean, I've watched it. Again, as it turns out, I seem to watch more Mariners games than Blue Jays games these days, and I've been pretty impressed with the way the Mariners are. They'll fight you tooth and nail. Mm-hmm. They pulled out some nice extra innings victories this year, and I don't know. It's just a team that refuses to quit.
All right, before we wrap this up, because we got to be out here in a couple of seconds, the big homework for this week is what do the Mariners do on the 25th of this month when it's Robinson Cano wine stopper night out at Safeco Field?
Wow.
Just saying.
It just, I mean, this is, I'm not going to say it's funny, but it was just, a couple of weeks ago where something happened with a team star player just before they gave away a bobblehead.
Or a promotion.
It's almost like you have to, that's pretty funny.
It happens.
Now, only in Seattle, would you have wine stopper night?
That's right. Or bong stopper night, for that matter. I guess you could use the same thing. Anyway, I wouldn't know what that is. All right, KP Wee, Nilo Donahoe, Lou Filippo, appreciate you guys stopping by. We will be back next Thursday. I think it is Thursday. 7 to 9 right here on the mighty TSN 1040 airwaves. Go to CanadiansBaseball.com. Get your tickets, your Nat Packs, your season tickets, your individual games. Again, June 20th, the season opens. I'm Rob Fay. Good night from the TSN studio.
This TSN 1040 podcast is powered by Metro Ford. It's hard to beat a Metro Ford deal in Fort Coquitlam and online at metromotors.com.